Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of American Grit with myself, Tim Jensen. We are joined today with a dear friend of mine, Luke Sherman. He's the Senior Vice President of Outreach at Folds of Honor. And we're here to talk about a new program that we are rolling out here at Grunstyle in collaborations with Fold of Honor called End of Watch. It's going to be starting here this month, October 28th. And we're going to talk about it today. Luke, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here, Tim.
Yeah. So, Luke, tell us a little bit about Folds of Honor. What is Folds of Honor? We all see it around golf courses and different marketing on campaigning, 501c3 work. But what is Folds of Honor? What does it represent?
Well, Folds of Honor is very significant in the fact it's the blue flag. It's the folded blue flag that is given to the military. It started with the military, but it is also given to our first responders now in those tragic moments where we lose somebody. It's hallowed ground. It's the flag that we've spilled blood in the mud in many different tours and many different wars and here in this country as well. So when people see the folded flag, they recognize that as the Folds of Honor, which is what it is. It's an honorable thing that we give to the families. So it began way back in the day with a gentleman that's now a lieutenant colonel named Dan Rooney. And Dan Rooney saw, and I'll tell you the story, it's a pretty neat story, but he's flying, he's a PGA professional, and he's flying from Oklahoma to Michigan. And he's going to, I believe at that point, I think he was heading up there to work as a PGA person at that point. And on the plane that he's on a commercial plane. And we're in the middle of one of the wars over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the pilot says, the captain comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, we're landing in Grand Rapids. Please, just out of respect, we have a special person on the plane today. And Dan had seen that guy. So Dan's a reserve fighter pilot. He's flying. He's had a couple tours of duty over in, I think, Iraq. And the pilot says and he sees a Marine. And I hope I don't make a mockery of this, but the Marine is in his best. So I think that's probably his class blues.
That's dress blues, yeah.
Dress blues, there you go. And so that individual's in first class, so Dan assumes that's the individual that the pilot's talking about. It's not. Yeah. It's his brother who has been killed in action and is in the bowels of that plane. And the pilot says, out of respect for the family, ladies and gentlemen, please give some respect and let's let the family unload this young man. That's his brother. Yeah. And give them that respect. So as Dan looks out of the plane, he can see out and he can see this family on the tarmac in the dark. And it's a little boy hanging on. That was our first recipient. Little boy hanging on to his mom as his deceased father is being pulled off the plane. And they do it right. And they've got the Marines there to receive him. His brother's there. And after this very emotional situation where Dan's captivated, he's a fighter pilot, but he still realizes, man, that's the worst day of that family's life right now. What are they going through? And he stops, recollects, and looks around and realizes half the plane's deboarded. And so I think in that moment, that conviction came on him to say, what can I do for that family? Because they deserve it. And so then formed the Folds of Honor. And Dan and his wife, Jackie, formed it in a garage above their house and began to formulate how can we take care of not just that wife, but also that child, which is the legacy that Marine, who's no longer with us, would want them to carry. And so then began the journey of the Folds of Honor, which provides scholarships and training and tutoring to our children as well as the surviving members of families. Began as military, and now it's expanded in 2022 to our first responders as well. So from tragedy, we take, and our creed and our code would be, honoring their sacrifice, educating their legacy. We've recently sort of modified that a little bit to honoring their service and celebrating America by pushing those families forward. That's
incredible.
Where it began.
And how long has it been operating?
2007, and it's a bell curve. It's ramped up amazing. I think it's 19,000 plus families this year have applied for scholarships. It's every year that works, but it's 52,000 scholarships out the door. I think $144 million. We don't get that, but for people like Budweiser, Quick Trip,
Right.
Delta,
Big
Coca-Cola,
sponsors,
and in partnerships with groups such as yours, that people that say this is an American thing, and we're going to take care of those families that have given the ultimate sacrifice. And it's not just those that gave a sacrifice, but you have folks that come back injured, folks that need that help, and it's our job to say, hey, we've got your back, whether it's spilling blood over there or spilling blood over here. And it's been a pretty interesting environment. 91 cents on the dollar out of that 144 million or 244 million. That to us is significant.
Yeah.
And the fact that 52,000 scholarships times 5,000 a scholarship, you can do the numbers. But 91 cents on the dollar for Star Charity, we still hold that line. And I love Dan. He's a dear brother of mine. But man, he is passionate about we will not hemorrhage money that people give us. We're going to put 91 cents in the dollar back toward those kids.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it speaks a lot to how these operations are seen, right? You see Charity Navigator, as these as
that's
the bellwether or the brand standard rather, right? For organizations. And, it certainly is important, right? Yeah. Now, with the focus of, Folds of Honor on that first responder family, you said this year, right, there was over 19,000 families that applied for scholarships.
Right.
What do you see in relation to years past? You say this is an annual event that has to happen.
Right.
Is that an uptick in that this year? When what does previous years look like?
If I was to look at our bell curve, and my donor service people would look at me and say, Luke, you got to know your numbers. But I'll tell you, I think it was 13,000 and a half last year.
Yeah.
19,000 this year. The year before that, it might have been like sub 10,000. Yeah. So what's happened is that the military members, man, they're good at sharing their information. Yeah. You got a brother Marine over here and another brother Marine, and he knows that guy's got 4 kids. And the first responder community is a little bit more clannish, but they're getting that out. But it is spreading like wildfire. Yeah. And I think people realize the wars come and go. But we still have an obligation to our children. I've got 4, you've got kids, everybody's got kids, and you look and say, what's your legacy? Legacy is not what my career in law enforcement, 30 years, means nothing to me. My legacy is what I left. Yeah. And so the word is out, and folks and families are saying we need this energy to carry that mission for our families.
Right. And you're former law enforcement, 30 years,
sir.
As I understand.
Yes,
what was your experience in law enforcement?
Back when I started in 91, I had hair, but it was a blessing. Yeah. I'm a kid that came out of the orphanage and foster system in Milwaukee in the 60s, and I was adopted and brought over into an environment. It's a chapter in a book I'm writing, from the system to the suburbs. Yeah. But so I consider everything to be an opportunity, but it was a blessing to serve people. My touch is mental illness. That's a big one for us. But to be able to serve, I served in SWAT. I ran our SWAT team. I ran our special response group, which is our civil unrest, public order, hugely important. Yeah. And then I ran a couple divisions, our special investigations division. So I had my hands on all of the highfalutin special operations stuff within the law enforcement community. But I would say it wasn't about how much action we got into. It was about how professional we did our job. And that was always something that, if I had a meeting with my chief or a mayor, Tulsa's a big city, but it's 800 proper law enforcement gun toters and about 700 firefighters. So that's your civil service people. But to be able to say to my mayor, we handled an incident that was combustible, and we did it with pride, honor, integrity, and professionalism, and we de-escalated the situation that could have went really south. Those were, to me, the shining moments where the community said, we got you. We believe in that because you're professional enough to get the job done. So many years of blessings.
It's and most of that in Tulsa. Right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I started in 1991 in the city of Tulsa and retired in April 2022.
Wow.
So it flew by, though.
Yeah. What do you see, like the current landscape? I remember growing up as a child, right? It was, society positioned law enforcement and first responders as those individuals that you want to approach in society, right? We were talking a little bit before the show on this.
Right.
I think it's, an interesting, topic to talk about where we are as a country, right, and how we value things. But growing up in that time period where it was, hey, approach a police officer, approach firemen, like talk with them. They're members of your community. They're neighbors, right? Where not so much today, right? Where the law enforcement are looked as members of the state, or these just very negatively, right? And they're put in very tough circumstances all across this nation, with very limited resources, both on the ground and then mostly after circumstances, right? Not like the networks that have insulated around the veteran and the veteran community, right? The law enforcement really doesn't have a lot of those programs, right? What is your perspective of where we are today?
Yeah, I'm interesting when people ask me that question. Great question. I look at it as an opportunity. Yeah. America believes in good, and it believes in our first responders, just like it believes in our military. Colonel Nick is my president of our company, and Colonel Nick said one day to me, he said, "Freedom is our military. They gave it to us. And you guys have it on the wall. This will defend. This country is sovereign ground to Americans, and safety, and our first responders give it every day." So I look at that as an opportunity. Yeah. There's 800 to 1 million first responders, and we can have gnashing and griping and complaining about how our communities don't back us, but I say turn that. I say turn it with professionalism. Put your head down. You're a service member, just like our military members. You signed up to serve, and serve with dignity and honor. And sometimes that service goes unchecked. Nobody really cares. But the beauty of it is, if you and I are in a car together, or car to car, and I look over and say, "Hey, man, we did that right." That's the thanks that you get. Sometimes the community will give it to you, and maybe at the end of your career, you'll get a decoration or a plaque from the mayor. But it's an opportunity, Tim. It's an opportunity for us to say, let's win this back through professionalism, and not tolerate mediocrity, and not tolerate getting into the political ebb and flow of whether or not people like us or not. And I'd say it to my troops. I had young generation. I think I had 3 generations with me when I was active, and the young kids really had an issue, and I love them to death, love them to life. They're good kids. They meant well, but I had a couple of them approach me and say, "Hey, boss, hey, captain, this and that and this and that." And I said, "You're focused on the wrong thing. Focus on serving." Yeah. And I said, that stuff will come around. And truth be told, how many million Americans are there? 380? Right. There's some that just don't like you. Right. Be good with it, man. Don't let it make your coffee taste any different. Do your job. And, the faith that you have and that higher power, whatever that is, we won't get into that. But do your job, and those people that know you will give you that nod. Right. And that's always been my deal. It's funny for me. I joined the SWAT team the first year, they don't talk to you. And then I recognized after one operation, after a year in, a couple of the vets turned to me and said, "Hey, good job, young buck." And I thought, okay, that was all I needed. Right. I didn't need to have them coddle me for a year. And the same applies for do your job. I don't want to get into super numbers, but 1 in 5 Americans have some level of mental illness. Oh, sure, yeah. And so the job of law enforcement is go out there. You're going to engage those people. They're homeless, right? But they're humans. Treat them with honor, dignity, and respect. Get them where they need to go, and that community will look at you and say, "Those officers are doing it right." Right. I'm an old former Marine, and my math ain't that great, but 1 in 5 with a mental illness, right? Yeah. And one officer's making about 30,000 touches a year with civilians. So that's roughly 6,000 times they're going to come in contact with somebody that's mentally unstable. Here's another fact to that: we're 10 times more likely with a person in a mental episode to have a deadly force incident, and put that person down. And so you have to recognize that. And you got to know, just like you're saying, there's 6,000 times a year I'm coming up against that. If I'm active and I'm rolling, be prepared, educate yourself. What you don't know, learn to know, and seek to understand. If you're a better officer than me in that de-escalation process, do your job and vet those things, but always learn. I hate mistakes. Yeah. I don't like to drop a football, but if I drop it, man, tell me how I dropped it and let's figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you see, with the military today, right? We see that they're up against some challenging recruitment numbers, probably because of the 20-year war and some of the things the government has, been doing to veterans, right? But do you see the same type of situation happening in law enforcement or even in first responding? Are people less likely to join those fields because of what they're seeing and how those fields are being treated by the population?
Yes. Significant downtick. Most of your law enforcement groups, your firefighters, your police, your mayors, your city councilors, they're trying to figure out how do we recruit. Yeah. Well, generations change. So you have different generations. The Z generation is different than the X. And then the group in front of them. But what we've seen is a significant downtick. I'll tell you, I'm happy to see it. It's starting to come back. Yeah. We're starting to see kids sort of pick their head up and realize that is a good job, and I love that ownership, inclusivity. Get in there and set it as yours. Yeah. Like you said, I think we said upstairs, if I'm a member of this community as a San Antonio police officer, I'm still a member of the community. Right. And it's an unbelievable privilege for me. So I think that narrative that we can start to teach people, this isn't just a job, it's a privilege to be able to serve that community. I think when you start to see that, you start to have people say, and I get paid for it? Right. And that's how that thing sort of rolls. The recruiting is huge. Military was down, our side is down, but I do see there's starting to be a little bit of a wrinkle. You see that current under the water where you're like, I think they're starting to figure it out again. Yeah. They just have to feel like it's a serious game when there's a heavy narrative that says they're bad. Yeah. And I think in that environment, a lot of people, they sort of pull back. And what I saw from 2020 on was law enforcement pulling back, literally in certain towns saying, we're just not going to respond. Right. We'll respond. And as soon as we're done, we're going back to the station. You can't have that because you got kids out there that need to see you. Right. And they need to play basketball with you, that crossover dribble, and put your gun belt down for a minute and actually connect to those kids, because those kids are who you serve. Right. Well, absolutely. I think growing up in, my time in the city of Chicago and seeing that from a different perspective, or the Chicagoland area rather. But I was that kid. Like I was a little punk, messing with the police officers when I was a kid. And, I'd look back at them like, oh man, but that's part of growing up. Well, I was 90 miles north of you in Milwaukee. Yeah. So small world. And had I not been sucked up out of that system, there's no doubt in my mind, and my mom and dad know this. My mom's a little Irish, red-haired lady, striking resemblance. But they adopted me, and they had kids. They didn't have to. Yeah. But I have said it many times. I said it at their 50th. I would have been on the other side. So I was fortunate, but I also look at that when I teach young officers and say, give kids an opportunity to make those decisions that carry them forward versus take them down and put them in the ground. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, first responders, firemen, all these individuals that have that touch with the community is so important, right? You never know. And then we think about some of the more tragic things, right? Of the end of life of some of these individuals, be it in a fire call, right. Or a response to a terrible situation that we see far too often, and then the end of watch call is being passed along the microphones. That's something that you guys are seeing a lot of with the community that you're serving. Now, why was it important for Folds of Honor to make the transition into the first responder side as well, beyond the military aspects? Interesting and great question. Dan and I are good friends, Lieutenant Colonel Dan, and we had a conversation years ago, and I'm that kind of guy. I'll say it, and we were together, and I said, brother, I said, we fold the flag the same way you do. And it was a neat call because he's a cerebral, he's a leader, he's an inspirational, but he looked at me and he goes, you're right. And from that, in his mind, he just began to realize, just like I said before, freedom, our military's given it to us. Mm-hmm. And we live in the greatest country in the world because we have a strong military that has said, we'll defend this.
Yeah.
We won't let you punch us, and we won't let you take our kids. Israel, that horrible situation, it's not happening here, we hope, right? Because our military and our members will say, we'll go to toe on you on that. So Dan realized when we talked about this folded flag, we followed the military on that. I buried, I think, 4 in my time where I had my Class A's on, and those are hallowed moments. And I think Dan realized freedom and safety. And our first responders, 2 million plus, putting it on the line. I mean, the numbers are unbelievable. 660,000 calls a day that first responders out there in Cincinnati and Wyoming, Cody, Wyoming, and Los Angeles and San Antonio, since we've sat here, they're responding.
Right.
And they're not just responding to cat in a tree or a ticket. They're responding to critical situations. So Dan, I think, looked at that and realized there are American warriors on the home front as our military defends us on those fronts out there. And they deserve that too, and those families do deserve that.
Yeah. I say this a lot in the American Grit program is, the military, gets a lot of respect for its job, right? And with due credit. But when it comes down to like the combat service of it all, it's a very small aspect, right?
Right.
But when you, in comparison to like the police officer, right, or the fireman or that EMT that's out there, they're coming up against this on the daily, right? On the daily. It was 600 calls, 600,000 calls a day.
Yeah, 660 is the number. 240 million 911 calls a year.
That is incredible, right? And again, let's bring this back into like the size of the community that's servicing that, right? And then when it all collapses, when that figurehead, male or female, loses their life while on the job, right? The families are devastated, right?
Left to pick it up.
And that's a hard, I think that's harder for me to look at through that lens, and knowing that, coming from that military side and seeing how all those my brothers have been treated, after their death, right? And then I look at the police officer, and it's, Chicago, New York, LA probably have the best in the way that they recognize their fallen officers. But nowhere else in the country is that recognized. That, I believe, is a huge disservice.
Yeah, I think it gets lost in the narrative, and I've always said this. I've always said we do phenomenal police funerals. Get emotional about it because I remember seeing a family that, I'm that way. I look at things different. I'm an emotional cat. That's always been me. And I'll go toe to toe with you on a hostage rescue, but I don't have a problem crying on your shoulder. Yeah. And I believe in that emotion. Emotions need to be part of our lives. You don't need to ignore them. And I'll touch into the mental side of that with our mental illness. And you talk about something there, and I'm sort of digressing, but 660,000 calls a day, those are left in the imprinted parts of a person's spirit and mind when they see tragedy. And they see it over and over and over again. And one thing I'm proud of that America has begun to do in these communities is recognize it. The military always leads that. And there has been more of that recognition of post-traumatic stress coming back from war. That was taboo maybe 5 years ago in the first responder community. You couldn't talk about that. So as a commander, if I had an officer that said, I'm struggling with a couple calls, HR comes in and they take his gun. And they say, Tim, you can't have your gun, and we're going to de-escalate you, and you're going to go work the desk. So what's that officer do? They just hide it. Yeah. And it just became a situation. It became an alcoholic. I start to self-medicate. I'm not nice to my family. All of those things. And so we've now recognized that. But that's important to me much more than it has been, that we have that ability to de-escalate situations. Yeah. And now what you're seeing with this new generation is they will hit that button quick as far as, hey, I need help. Yeah. If there's a horrible crime scene and you have 17 officers out there, and I'm proud of this, you'll now see a supervisor come in and say, who is there? And then they'll start working on our counselors and our chaplains to say, who needs help? Yeah. and who needs to de-escalate for a day or two from service, because service is just a monster that we have to continually do. We can't check out. And if an officer starts to lose a degree of dimension of sanity, pretty soon, by 5 or 6 days or 6 months, he's going that way, and I can't serve you effectively.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. We're already seeing some, huge tensions being put on the law enforcement across the country, having working 2-3 shifts at a time because of shorthanded positioning. So it's an incredibly tough position to be in, right? And then the families, as they're living through all that, and then to see or experience that loss is a tragedy. So step in Folds of Honor now, right? In the End of Watch program. I think what is beautiful about this relationship, my friends, is Grunt Style has been involved in this for a very long time, and really paying respect to our community in the ways that we can, right? We are great storytellers here, and we sell great product. And we've, over the years, married the two together, through a GSL program called Grunt Style Limited. And during that period of time, families would come to us and, and say, hey, we want to recognize our fallen officer, and we want to do it in the form of a T-shirt, and we want to, use that money off those sales and do something good with it. And that's been something we've done going back to the Dallas 5, right? And we raised about $250,000 for those families, and split that amongst 5 of them. And now I think it is more appropriate, as we are seeing more of this, 19,000 families in just this year, right? We're not even halfway through. We've reached that, right? But 19,000 families, there's a need. There is a definite need, and it does not appear that the support network is there. So that's where this beautiful partnership comes, where Grunt Style and Folds of Honor are going to collaborate together, where we can help service and raise additional funds to service those 19,000+ families that are currently in the Folds of Honor program, and really develop something of an accelerant to start addressing these families faster. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
And I started a little bit into it before. The families of people that serve our communities and in the military, the families are part of that process too. Wives watch husbands go away, and husbands watch wives go away. And kids say goodbye to moms and dads as they go and serve. And then in those tragic situations, and they do happen, hundreds of them a year, as far as our first responders are killed in the line of duty. Those situations are tragic, and we do a great job of doing a funeral. But I've always said, what's the next day? How does the family pick up as Americans? Do they believe in the system? Or does everybody say, Tim or Luke, we're sorry for your sacrifice. We're so sorry. And the next day, and I'm sort of giving myself away as in Wisconsin, I'm sorry, instead of sorry. But that's always been the case. And I'll give you a goofy story, and it's a sad one, but I lost a brother. And I remember the day that we lost him. He's a canine officer, and killed in an ambush in an alley, had kids. And his canine was there with him when he passed. And I remember significantly, and it's a short story, and I'll make it shorter, but all Class A's, they bring the whole family in. There's 5,000 people in Oklahoma that are in this church to honor our fallen brother who's gone. Thoracic, hit from behind with a shotgun, ambushed. The dog wouldn't let us rescue, TBD guys to get in there and rescue him. The bad guy's gone. Tragic situation all around. We're burying him with pride. You've got your military, Class A, the guard, almost like the Marine deal. You've got 2 of our best, our honor guard people, guarding him motionless for hours as we sit and wait for the family. The family comes in and sits. Little boy and a little girl. I remember that poignantly. I mean, that's in my mind, seared in my mind. Casket draped with a U.S. flag, and then they bring the dog in. And this is a church, and you think a dog's in here, but the dog comes down with another handler, the only handler that could harness that dog, minus our fallen brother, circles that casket, starts to whimper, not a peep in the place, circles it again and puts his paw on that casket. And I looked at my brothers, all of us sitting there, and I thought, man, even the dog gets the sovereignty and the significance of this catastrophic finality of this. Mm-hmm. And then I looked at the family, and I remembered the family sitting there just bawling. Everybody's bawling. I tell you that story, fast forward, that was 2007. I'm riding a bike in downtown Tulsa to reset my mind, which is one of the things I do before a tour of a week of being a commander at a special division. And I stop to get a bottle of water and take a drink. And I look up and I see a plaque on a wall, brick wall like this. They had regentrification. The area was different, but it was where he died. And it brought me back to that moment of thinking, my gosh, it's 2019. What happened to that family? Who had their back? Yeah. How did they navigate life? And that brings me back to End of Watch. End of Watch is so powerful in the fact that it puts in front of Americans, we honor these families and we carry their legacy. And even though those soldiers or those first responders in this case are gone, those street warriors, as they call them, we're going to take care of their families and we won't forget them.
That's right.
And we're going to carry that mission forward unapologetically. And the people that I've in my community that know, and my job that know of this situation are super excited just because it is another dimensional, in your face way to say, we're not going to forget the sacrifice of these people that had the privilege to serve. And we're going to do it on behalf of their families. And once again, almost push those kids and that wife or that husband forward and say, America believes in you and we won't forget. So End of Watch to me is the beginning of a new journey to carry that family in America and that community forward. And I think the communities that are privileged enough and honored enough to have those End of Watch situations will absolutely begin to heal from that tragedy.
Yeah.
And the people I've talked to are fired up about it. They said that is unbelievable because we'll have the availability to take something from that tragedy. We won't wallow in the misery of it. We're going to take something forward. And in the form of a shirt where, and I've said this to my wife, you're going to see an End of Watch shirt 6 years from now in a community and you're going to be like, I remember that situation. And somebody's flying that flag or that shirt with pride.
Right.
And it's just going to take everybody back to, we didn't forget you.
That's right. That's right. You know, I think one of the things that I'm very proud about Grunt Style is our commitment to service. Right.
That's right.
Our commitment to those individuals that are willing to raise their hand for somebody else. Right.
That's right.
You know, there's a lot of talk of people, you know, that say, you know, that they're, I'll be there, you know, I'll do this, I'll do that, right? All hat, no cattle. Yeah. Right. But, you know, I think what is important is, you know, to really frame it into that understanding of service, right? To be in a position where you are doing selfless acts for other individuals, right, is probably the most fulfilling aspect of humanity, right? Is that gracious act towards somebody else, mm-hmm. And you know, putting your own life in harm's way because of something that you believe in.
That's right.
And I think we need more of that in this country. And I think, you know, it goes back to what I was, you know, speaking about earlier is, you know, we don't recognize the loss of officers on a national level here in the United States as we do as, a military member that might be fallen. And, you know, we know when a Navy SEAL dies, right? But we don't know when an officer from, hometown USA dies. And I think that needs to change. Especially if we want to be promoting a more a lifestyle in this country that recognizes what it means to be a part of a community, and that we all have a sense of responsibility towards each other. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think that's where, you know, this program has that ability to do so. You know, we can elevate these things in ways to get it more into the household conversation of saying, hey, did you know that Officer Jackson was, did this in his community, or whatever the case may be when it comes to the loss of life, or even firefighter Wilson, right? Might have been, writing the next, scientific paper on whatever, who knows, but, talking about those things and humanizing them in ways that they're not being right now, I think, is the objective.
Yeah. I mean, there's 8 to a million first responder gun toters, as they say. At the last check that I looked at, 1.3 million first responder firefighters. Here's the beauty of what you're talking about in service. Almost 800,000 of those firefighters are volunteers.
Right.
And so they're bankers. They're a guy that owns his own, lawn cutting business. But he says, you know what, I'm going to serve my community. And where end of watch has a dimension that I don't think people grasp is this. The aspect or the dimension of the community saying, you served us, now we serve you.
Right.
And it becomes much tighter. It's not compartmentalized or bifurcated or separated. He served. And I've heard people say that, well, it's part of your job. It's not part of my job to die.
Right.
And definitely it's not part of my job to leave my family. They don't want me to do that, and neither do you if I'm serving you. But that's where the end of watch really, to me, creates a momentum circle where the community says, that volunteer firefighter was killed in a grass fire. And his family, he's a banker. He didn't have to be there, but he was or she was. And that's powerful for me in that service role where the community says, you know what? We're not going to accept this as a tragedy and just leave it there. We're going to push momentum into this end of watch program. And you and I talked about it. I'm excited about it. You will see communities. First responders are much more clannish community-wise than our military. You're overseas serving. We know that. We see you in a uniform and we come back and thank you for your service at the airport as kids are coming back. And I call them kids because they're young. Occasionally you'd see a 1-star or 2-star moving through there at a high rate of speed. But in those communities, Abilene, Fargo, North Dakota, you have a police officer that's killed in the line of duty in Fargo, North Dakota. That entire community is talking about it, is hurting from it, is reeling from it, is talking about trying to figure out what happened. But that can't happen here in Fargo. And once you get past that initial shock of, he's dead, then we got to say, okay, as a community, what are we going to do?
Right.
And those communities are there. Louisiana, we had one down there that I was aware of. Car dealerships going to the widow and saying, what can we do? Car wash, what can we do? How can we help?
Right. And
it's important.
And I think what we are looking to accomplish with this relationship is taking care of that gift that they've left behind.
That's right.
The young ones, right?
That's right.
Making sure that they are set up for a successful future, right? By scholarships. Could you share with the audience what are these scholarships and what are we going to be doing with them?
Yeah, so the scholarships with the Folds are every year a child that's what we call a legacy member, a Gold Star kiddo, is allowed to apply for and receive a scholarship through the Folds of Honor. So if it's a 9th grader, if it's a 7th grader, they're going to be in that system for a while. What it doesn't do is we don't hand a check to the family. We go through a scholarship program where the kids have to actually maintain a certain GPA and they have to apply. Now, it's not just universities. And the neat thing that I believe in this country is you have very smart people that are in the universities and getting their master's degrees. And then you have very hardworking people that might be a plumber or it might be a craftsman that says, you know what, I'm one of 3 kids and my 2 brothers and sisters are heading off to the university. My dad was killed as a firefighter and I'm applying for the scholarship and I can take that $5,000 every year and I can apply it toward being an electrician. So you have craft as well, and you have journeyman craft scholarships, also tutoring. So if you have a child that is not getting to where they need to get to, there's levels of private tutoring as well that family can say, this Luke's struggling in math, and man, he got wiped out. His dad's gone. It took him about 2 years to come up for air. But now he's struggling in English and he's not going to graduate. So that mama can at that point get that scholarship and use some of those funds for our tutoring program to get that kid back. I call it momentum. Get them back on plane and push them to they're never going to recover from that mom or dad being gone. But at least we can push that. So the End of Watch provides that. The other thing that you all are doing with this partnership is we call it Where Are They Now? So we're now tracking some of our scholarship kiddos. And you're now starting to see, I think we've got 2 young ladies that have just entered their medical they're going to be doctors.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And they went through all of, I think one was really young, middle school, high school, college. I'm going to be a doctor and I'm serving my community because my dad would want me to. And it's pretty powerful stuff to see that young lady walking around with her white jacket on, doing her, oh geez, I should know. I got a brother who's a doctor, their residency, you know, and it's pretty neat to see that. Yeah. And from that, when you talk to that young lady, she'll say, never would have made it here without the love and support of my community, the Folds of Honor, and the people that were philanthropic that pushed money into that to help me in those down times where I missed my dad, to be able to say go. Yeah. And to watch is the same thing, just on steroids.
Right. Now, how do you guys, as an organization, source the families? Are they coming to you? Are you reading the newspapers around the country and reaching out when there's these tragedies? Like, how's that work?
Yeah. It's word of mouth. It's through networks such as yours, networks such as ours, where people begin to, military guys and gals shared that information quickly. Because coming back from overseas, they're saying, hey, I need help. And we also provide scholarships to military members who are not deceased, but who have percentages of disability. I think it's the DD-214s and some of that stuff. There's people that get damaged. We got you. The same applies on the first responder side. So catastrophic injuries where they can't do the job anymore, they're in a wheelchair, we got you. Yeah. We got your family, but it's word of mouth. It's family to family. As the guy over outreach, I'm traveling to cities. I'm going to be in Kansas City. I'm speaking to chiefs and sheriffs in a huge room and saying, you are the check writers. That's not what I need right now. I need you to spread that awareness to your communities in the Kansas City metro. There is a group called the Folds of Honor. We're partnering with Grunstyle. If there are situations, hit that button. Yeah, let us know. Get on that website and start to go through the process. We won't hand money away. And the neat thing is, some of those kids age out, and it's neat to see the honesty of our soldiers and our first responders. If a kid's not active, hey, Dad, I'm going to take a break for a year. They don't push and take that $5,000 because that family knows your family might need it. So it sort of somewhat polices itself through our scholarship donor service program. But they apply every year. I think it's Feb 1 to March 3/1 is the application period. Big dossier that you have to hand in. Then our scholarship staff goes through those 19,000 and begins to rate them. And you said it earlier, Tim, 19,000, and I think it's 500 plus. The awards probably are in the 13 to 14 to 15 because it's a lot of money. Yeah. So the need is great. The more companies that would come in, Colonel Dan Rooney would always say, I always wanted to give a scholarship to every single person that applied. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love nothing more for anybody that's listening to get involved into this program in this collaboration, right? I mean, if you're a big executive out there that's wanting to get involved and bring your company into this, we'd love to have you, right? This is an incredible effort that we are putting forward to identify and provide relief to these families, and most importantly, provide a future for the young ones, right? Momentum. Give them that hand up, right, of opportunity, and so how does with the way that the program is working, right? The way that people are going to be able to get involved is to make a direct purchase off of a product that will be listed on this end of watch page. Right. And with that, a portion of the money will go to service the family, and then the portion of the money will go to service Folds of Honor and its programming to continue to support these scholarships. Right. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Philanthropically, people would come in if it's a local, because it's going to be a local in this case. I believe, and if I'm letting the cat out of the bag, tell me now, but 12, end of watch initially is where we feel like we need to be. That's significant. Those are significant numbers, but they're also small numbers because there's a lot of people that are dealing with tragedy. But I think from there, you can really start to see how people are going to see where their money's going. Yeah. And with a shirt, we don't forget that. It's not that day of that funeral and 9 years later, I forgot about that guy. No, that shirt lives as long as that shirt is on somebody's back, people see it. But the ability for us to say, okay, from those funds, the family is taken care of. The family is not forgotten. America is about opportunity. Children that see a significant other, their mom or their dad, killed in war or killed on the streets of Tulsa or wherever it's at, San Antonio, those kids don't deserve that.
Right.
So this is an opportunity to carry momentum forward. So that's just like me and my adoption. What an unbelievable opportunity for those kids to be able to have America and that community say, come on, buddy, we're going to pick you up. I know your dad's gone, but we're going to carry you forward and you're going to carry his legacy.
Yeah.
And I think kids start to identify that, but it's hugely inclusive of those communities. But I do believe that as that begins to fuel itself, those shirts will fuel and those probably those designs, those pieces of art on behalf of that person are going to put money in the pocket of that family. But also the family then has an amazing opportunity, even through tragedy, to give back to America through the Folds of Honor. So we'll be able to say to family 1 and family 2, we love you. We're sorry this happened. And we carry your honor and your pride forward on behalf of your lost brother or dad or whatever it is. But we also want to applaud you because the community that got behind you through your sacrifice took care of so many other families out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
that's Americans taking care of Americans.
It's makes me proud to be an American.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And I think we're going to be starting off with 12, right?
Yeah.
To your point, it's not even a scratch, not even drip in the pan. But that's year 1, and I think that we can by year 2 grow that incredibly. And with all of your help out there, we can do that very quickly. And very efficiently, because I will tell you, there's nothing like a grunt style fan out there that is willing to get into something passionate and throw their entire selves behind it. And that is an incredible part of this community that we just love so much. And I think it's important, again, why grunt style does the things that we do, right? Is preserving that idea of the next generation of Americans behind us.
Right.
That is our responsibility. That is the greatest gift that this country has, is the children of this country, right? Mm-hmm. If they're going to grow up and carry the flames of freedom, and we have to provide the environment, be the example for them to, make sure that flame is raging hot.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And and that's the commitment that Grunt Style will continue to make as long as the doors are open and we continue to service our product and a community, is making sure that we are doing the right things and making an impact with everybody that is involved. So I'm overly excited about this project.
Yes.
Kicks off October 28th, 2024, this year, right around the corner. And we want you guys to be involved, right? We're going to list ways of getting involved on this podcast, as well as in written form. You'll be able to find out American Grit. So go check out gruntstyle.com at the end of watch programming. Check out Folds of Honor. Where can people find more about Folds of Honor if they want to be a direct contributor to
Sure. We got 2 different deals. foldsofhonor.org is our main site, and we've got a deal on there called it's the 13. So you'll have the squad. It's 13. $13 a month is to be a squadron member. It's the Air Force guys that our 2 leaders are Air Force guys, so it's to be part of the fighter squadron.
Right on.
But it's 13, and people say, well, the number 13's bad. The number 13 are the 13 folds of the flag. And I think when people really truly understand, the military did it right when they got that flag. People, when I present that in meetings and conversations, they don't recognize it. But I said it's the 13 folds of the flag. So what we challenge people with is become a squadron member and give us $13 a month, and we can give you our assurance, 91 cents of that. Every dollar's going toward that mission. And It's a tough mission.
Yeah, really is. Luke, I want to say thank you. You're the real deal.
As well,
I appreciate you and the work that you do with Folds of Honor and really making a legacy for those families that have gone through some incredibly tough situations and tragedies.
Well, we're honored. We're tickled. And we're ready to go. Every time I talk to my executive group about this partnership, this is how it's supposed to be done. And we are super excited. I snicker, when I first found out about this and you and I started to have a dialogue, because you don't realize how many true red-blooded American people are wearing Grunt-style shirts.
Right.
So every time we're at one of our grocery stores or in the airport, and I'm like, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. And so I do believe that Americans will look at this as an unbelievable opportunity, even if it's quiet. Hey, I'm just going to give a little bit toward that. I don't even know about that person that died in that city, but I'm buying that shirt just because.
Yeah.
Because I know what it's going to do. So we're extremely honored to be part of this, and we thank you for your vision to move this thing forward, and we won't rest until we've taken care of everybody, which means we're not going to rest.
That's right. That's right.
So
well,
thank
Luke,
you. Thank you.
Thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, that is American Grit, Folds of Honor, End of Watch, Grunt Style. Check it out. We're incredibly proud of this program, and we hope that you will be too. And share it with your friends, family, and loved ones. And let's continue to do the mission. Until next time, you know what to do. Be kind to one another and wash those stinking hands. We'll see you soon.